Hey there again, this is Justin Strawn from Maroon and White Nation. I'm conducting another Maroon and White Nation Periscope chat here on the Periscope app. It's been a little while since I've done some of these, so the last time I did one was probably about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, when I did the biggest disappointments I've had since I became a Mississippi State fan. Today, while I'm waiting up for my son here at Cherokee Valley Golf Club in Olive Branch to finish up his golf clinic, I'm going to talk about my favorite MSU teams of all time, the teams at Mississippi State that have brought me the most joy, the most happiness. Like I said, last one I did the biggest disappointments I've had since being a Mississippi State fan. I did 5. I was going to just do a top 5 for favorite MSU teams of all time. However, I decided to go ahead and throw a 6th one in there because there were 6 that just kind of stood out above all the rest. Now, these aren't the best MSU teams of all time. You could always argue that maybe there were teams that were better than these, but ever since I've been a Mississippi State Bulldog fan, these are the 6 teams that have brought me the most joy at the end of the year. So let me go ahead and get started. At number 6, I went with the 1999 Mississippi State football team. This was my first year at Mississippi State. I was a junior. I transferred in from Northwest the previous year, and this was the team that basically did everything with defense. They weren't a very good offensive team. Wayne Madkin was in his 2nd year as a starter, and this was the first team that was ranked number 1 defensively for this in the country. I think they may have been ranked number 1 the 2nd in 2000 as well, but I'm not 100% positive about that. But they were the best defensive team in the SEC. Got off to an 8-0 start before losing their first game to Alabama and their chances to win the West against Alabama. So with it, especially being my first year, I saw all the games at home. I didn't go to any road games, but I saw every home game. It was a really, really special year. We had Wayne Madkin, who had some fantastic, improbable comeback attempts and pulled a lot of things off that a lot of us didn't think possible, especially after losing his starting job the previous year to Wayne Madkin. So that was a really fun year. My number 5 team on this list was the 2004 basketball team. This team would have been up a lot higher had it done more in the postseason than what it did. But the 2004 basketball team was arguably the best regular season team that any Mississippi State team has ever fielded or taken the court. They were the SEC champs. They only lost 2 games in SEC play that year. They won every single game in the SEC on the road. So they had a lot going for them. They were a number 2 seed, and had they done better in the SEC tournament that year, there's a decent chance they might have been a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. The thing that really hurts about this team is they had a chance to do so much more, being a number 2 seed in the NCAA tournament, and then losing that game in the 2nd round. That's really what put them back, because there was a little bit of disappointment at the end. But just watching that team play throughout the entire year, they were one of the best teams I've ever seen play, and to sit there and watch them over and over again and just do what they did on the court throughout the entire year, it was really impressive, and it was just a lot of fun to watch. I hated to see it end the way that it did in the 2nd round of the NCAA tournament, but that team was one of the most fun to watch throughout the entire year of any Mississippi State team I've ever had the chance to watch. So number 6 was the 1999 football team. Number 5 was the 2004 basketball team. Coming at number 4 for me was the 1998 football team. This is the only team to make it to Atlanta to play in the SEC championship game. They were a great team. They were a good, solid team, but they weren't a team that was just real dominant or anything. They just found ways to win. I mean, they had some bad losses that year, but the fact that they took us on a wild roller coaster ride to the SEC championship game in Atlanta that year, it was a lot of fun to watch. They had some help along the way. They needed Arkansas to have just an improbable fumble against Tennessee the week before they played Arkansas for a chance to get to Atlanta to pay off for them, and it did. So there was a lot of things that had to go right, but they had J.J. Johnson, who was one of the best running backs we've probably ever had at Mississippi State. He's only there for 2 years. I even ranked him number 5 on my greatest running back list of all time at Mississippi State. He helped carry the team to where it got to where made it to the SEC championship game. Then you had Wayne Mackin coming in and filling in for Matt Wyatt as a redshirt freshman. Matt Wyatt didn't have a very good year in 1998. He got off to a really bad start. Wayne Mackin came in, replaced him, and helped get, and basically did just enough to get the team to where they had some great throws against Arkansas at the very end of that game to put us in a position to win the SEC West. All we had to do was beat Ole Miss the following week, a team that wasn't playing very well that year. So that was a really good team as well. It was one of my favorite teams to ever suit up and wear the maroon and white. So number 6 was the 1999 football team. Number 5 was the 2004 basketball team. Number 4 was the 98 football team. Number 3 is the 2014 football team, the one that we just experienced. It would have been higher had they won the SEC West. If they'd won the SEC West, this team probably would have been number 1 on my list. But having the 2 losses in the SEC West at the very end of the year, plus the disappointing showing in the Orange Bowl, made me put them a little bit lower than my other 2, so they didn't crack the top 2. But there's no question that last year's football team was one of the most enjoyable and one of the most fun to watch as a Mississippi State fan. I don't think you'll ever get any arguments about that. Dak Prescott had a year to remember. The Bulldogs reached number 1 in the polls for the first time ever and stayed there for 5 weeks in a row. So that was just a really fun team to watch. It was there was a time when you just didn't think the Bulldogs were going to lose. If you were sitting there watching them, I mean, a lot of people, Mississippi State fans, had a lot of faith going into the Alabama game just because, if they were playing as well as they could, you didn't really feel like they could lose. I still don't know if they played as well as they could have in any of those last few losses. I think they had a lot of bad performances. I think that was a lot of the reasons why they lost. It had a lot to do with the other teams, but also had a lot to do with the fact that Mississippi State just didn't play up to their potential, I don't believe. But just seeing that team go from a team that wasn't even ranked in the beginning of the year to number 1 in one of the quickest time periods from going from unranked to ranked was just a lot of fun to watch. It was really, really enjoyable, especially being my first full year as a blogger. It was really a lot of fun to cover and to write about. So there's a lot of experiences that went with that as well. So that's one reason. But had they gone higher in the postseason, had they won the SEC West, made it to the championship game or whatever, they probably would have been higher. They probably would have been number 1. Number 2 on my list is the 2013 baseball team. That was obviously the team that made it to the national championship game. That was the team that was playing as well as anybody else throughout the postseason. They got hot at the right time. A lot of people take some of the credit away from John Cohen. They say, well, the reason he got that team to the national championship games is because they got hot at the right time. Who cares if that's the reason or not? If you managed them well, you can argue all day about that. But the big thing with that team is they just took us on such a wild ride, and they were so unique. I mean, they were just with the beards and with just the intricacies of which they played the game. The fact they didn't really have any dominant pitchers in the starting rotation. They relied on their bullpen to do it. There was a lot of things that was just different about that team that made them fun to watch, and just the fact that they went from a team that was only probably above average in the regular season. They did really well in the out of conference play, but once they got to conference play, it only went 16-14. But it was just enough to get them to host a regional, and then they carried that momentum into the super regionals and ultimately into the College World Series. It was a lot of fun to go through, a lot of fun to sit there and watch that team grow and to exceed expectations based off of what most people thought they could do with the pitching that they had. I mean, when you look at that roster, you look at their pitching staff, the fact that they only had 1 pitcher who could consistently go more than 3 or 4 innings a game, it was really an impressive feat. And just the fact that they were able to do that was one of the most gratifying experiences as a Mississippi State fan. So, number 6 on my list, like I said, was the 1999 football team. Number 5 on my list, 2004 basketball team. Number 4 was the 1998 football team. Number 3, the 2014 football team. And number 2 on my list was the 2013 baseball team. Number 1 on my list of favorite Mississippi State teams of all time, that goes to the 1996 basketball team. They got the edge over the 2013 baseball team, mainly because basketball is a more mainstream sport. It's easier to watch, it's easier to follow along with. With baseball, even with the 2013 baseball team, we didn't really, unless you were a season ticket holder, you probably didn't get to see all the games in person. You probably didn't get to see a majority of them. As a matter of fact, I probably only saw a handful of them in person. I'm sorry, not in person, but on television, simply because of the fact that college baseball was not covered very well up until last year. Now with the SEC Network, we can at least watch every game streamed if we want to. Back then, you couldn't even do that. So things have changed a little bit, but back then you couldn't watch all the games, and we're talking just about 2 years ago. So it shows you just how quickly times can change. But the 2013 baseball team, like I said, they lost out because I didn't get to experience it the way that I got to experience the 1996 basketball team. If you don't remember the 1996 basketball team, or if you only remember the good parts of the 1996 basketball team, you may not remember that that team had tremendously high expectations. The 1995 team made it to the Sweet 16 under the leadership of Darrell Wilson and Eric Dampier. They were a really good team, but they got blown out in the round of the Sweet 16 by the eventual national champions in the UCLA Bruins. But there was a lot of expectations on that team because, for the most part, everybody was coming back from the 1995 team. Plus, you had the #1 junior college player in America coming in Dante Jones. So expectations were really high. I think they started off the season ranked number 8 in the preseason poll. There was a lot of things that people were talking about this team as being a potential Elite 8 Final Four team. And they got off to a really bad start. They didn't play very well. Their record in the SEC was either like 9-7 or 10-6. They were actually, at one point, people weren't 100% certain they were going to even make the NCAA tournament. But they played really well down the stretch. Late January, late into February, and into March, they kind of turned things around. They started playing as well as they had all year. Ended up winning the SEC West like they were expected to do. They just didn't win it the way that many thought they would. So they won the SEC West, used that momentum, carried them into the SEC tournament, and once they got in the SEC tournament, they played as well as they had all year. Ended up beating Kentucky after Kentucky kind of drubbed them in the Humphrey Coliseum earlier that year, and eventually rode that momentum all the way into the Final Four. Like I said, this team won out mainly because I saw almost every single game. Every single game that was televised, I watched, and a lot of their games were being televised. So it was a lot of fun to follow those guys. Darrell Wilson is still my favorite player of all time. I know he's not the best Mississippi State player to ever play the game. I know he's not the greatest or most talented player, but just watching him shoot 3 after 3 after 3 and knock him down was just unbelievable. Once he got hot, I never thought he was going to miss. I just didn't. I thought he was always going to hit every single shot that he took. So anyway, that's my list of favorite MSU teams of all time. Like I said, number 6 was the 1999 football team. Number 5 was the 2004 basketball team. Number 4 was the 1998 football team. Number 3, last year's football team. Number 2, the 2013 baseball team. And number 1 was the basketball team from 1996. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll have this up on the website a little bit later on if you didn't get a chance to catch it live. So until then, I will see you next time.